Okay, so we're going to get started just about now. It's roughly 2 p.m. So I'd just like to begin by saying that my name is Chris. I'm the instructor today, so feel free to write questions in the chat box. And as we go along, you can write your questions and comments, and I will try to read and answer as many of them as I can. Sometimes we might not have enough time to do everything, but I'll try to answer your questions as much as I can. The other thing to remember is just because we had some people who are a little bit confused, this is CAEL CE. It is not the CELPIP test. So if you are doing CELPIP and you're looking to be a permanent resident or just immigrating into Canada, this might not be the test that you're thinking of. This is the CAEL CE test, which is for academic English. And that means usually for higher education, such as universities and colleges. Okay, so if you're in the right test, then welcome. This is lesson 3 of the CAEL CE test preparations course. There are 4 lessons in this program. And for your interest, we are going to be running lesson 4 at the same time next Monday. And we still have some spaces open if you would like to register. So feel free to write a message and comment anytime you want. If you see an orange arrow on your screen, you can click on the orange arrow and open it to see the chat box. If you're using a smartphone or tablet, you can click on the question point that you might see. And feel free to have a pen and paper or something if you want to take some notes as we go. Oh, thanks for letting me know, Baki. That's interesting. So you need CAEL for academic purposes and CELPIP perhaps for PR. Fantastic. Well, I hope that both can be useful for you. Okay, everyone. So before we start the actual main lesson, I'd just like to ask you, everybody here, a question. So I'm going to give you a poll. And the question says, have you taken any of our other CAEL CE workshops? So have you done any lessons like this before? If you have, please click yes. If you haven't, please click no. And if you're just not sure, then feel free to say not sure. Thank you. Hi, Daniel. Welcome back. And I do remember you, by the way. You've been very good with the questions and comments so far. It's been great to have you. So sorry, Daniel, we're doing the poll again that you might have done before, just to see how everybody is doing. And thank you, everyone. I'm going to close this poll now. So I'll just show you the answers quickly. It says 54% yes, 38% no, 8% not sure. All right, I'd like to try another one quickly. So this poll says, are you trying to decide if the CAEL CE test is right for you? So that means, are you still thinking about whether to take the CAEL CE test, or have you already decided? So I'm going to launch this one now, and it's just yes or no. If you already registered for the CAEL CE test, you can just say no. Okay, thanks for answering that, everyone. I see so far 65% of people have voted. Just wait one more second. Okay, I guess nobody else is voting right now. So I'll close this one and show you the answers. So far, 73% said yes, 27% said no. All right, so I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll start the lesson properly. The last one says, have you registered for the CAEL CE test? Okay, have you registered for the CAEL CE test? Okay, I'm launching that now. All right, so please let me know, yes or no. Just have you registered? So of course, if you're not sure yet, just click no. All right, thank you very much. Yes, Baki, this is the official test. Yes, it just means, are you registered for the official test? So if you did the free online test before or a practice test, that's different. This is just the real test. Okay, all right, I'll close this poll now and share the answers. 38% said yes, 60% said no. All right, so by the way, I just want to remind everyone, if there is any technical problem, for example, if you can't hear me anymore, or you can't see the screen properly anymore, just exit the webinar and then come back. That way, that should solve the audio problem for you. Okay, so if ever there's a problem, just leave the webinar and then come back in, and hopefully that will fix it. If it still doesn't work, you can also try using a different web browser. And also, I just want to let everyone know that I do have a cold, so my voice might be a little bit strange today, so I'm sorry about that. All right, so let's get started. This is an overview of what we're covering today, and this is part 3 of the CAEL test. So that means that we are mostly focusing on listening and speaking skills because those are the ones that are covered in this part of the test. So we'll be looking at the short listening and the long listening, as well as going over the different question types that are there. And we will also do some listening practice where I can play some audio for you, and you can also think about how difficult that might be in the test or how easy it might be if you're getting some practice. And we can go over some listening strategies that can help you to prepare for the test. In some ways, we are doing some similar stuff that we did in the previous lesson. So if you came to the previous lesson, you'll notice that we're using a sample response from a test taker. And that means you might be more familiar with this material. If this is your first lesson, don't worry. It doesn't matter that it's your first time. But just if you were here last time, you might recognize the test taker that we use in the audio. Okay, so let's get started with that. And this is just a brief overview of the test. So if this is your first lesson, we are now doing part 3 of the test. In lesson 1, we did part 1. In lesson 2, we did part 2. And now we're focusing on part 3, which has a short listening passage, long listening passages, and a speaking question about the long passage. And you can see that those things are highlighted there. Because we're talking about listening today, the listening skills that we're talking about also relate to the listening questions that are used in the long listening passage in part 4 and the long listening passage that's in part 5 of the test. So basically, the listening skills that we learn today can be used in these tests in any listening question. Okay, and we're mostly focusing on part 3. All right, so these are the CAEL CE band scores. This is just an overview for people to get a brief idea. If you were here in the previous lesson, you already saw this. These are the CAEL CE band scores that you mostly need for university or colleges. Some universities and colleges might take a 60, some take a 70, and some require an 80, which can be quite difficult to get. So please make sure you ask your college or university or your job. Please ask them what you need specifically, because we don't know, right? So please check with them to get your specific score, and then you know what your target needs to be. Okay, so I hope that's clear to everyone. And we're going to start by looking at the listening tasks, and that's the short listening, long listening, and then some listening skills with practice where you can listen to some audio. Listening question types, which is the different variety of question types that are in the test. There are 6 different types. And also I will give you some listening strategies to help you prepare better for the test. Okay, so that's our overview for today. Okay, so I want to start by just explaining the 2 types of listening task. The short listening has 1 or 2 audio passages, and it's somewhat informal. So it might be an explanation for the type of class that you're doing, or it might be something that's happening on the university campus, like a social club or something like that for students. And these short listening passages will cover about 3 questions. They give you about 30 seconds to preview the questions, and then 60 seconds to review after you are done answering them. Or you might still use that time to actually answer the questions if you are running out of time. So you have 60 seconds to look back at your questions and sort of double check that they are okay. For the long listening, you have 1 or 2 audio passages, and these are more academic, even more academic and more formal. So that means they could be about a lecture, they could be guidelines for an academic textbook, or a passage from a textbook. They are about 11 questions long, and they take about 2.5 minutes to preview which means, before the audio passage starts, you have about 2.5 minutes to look at the questions before the audio starts. And then after the audio is finished, you have about 3 minutes to review before you move on to the next part. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense so far. Remember, you can ask me any questions that you want in the questions box, okay? Just type a message into the chat box if you would like to ask me anything, okay? All right, so I want to draw your attention to a few important features of the listening screen. So while the audio is playing, you can see a blue play bar on the left of the screen, and that's the blue bar there. When the audio is almost finished, the blue bar will move more and more to the right. So when the audio is finished, the blue bar will be complete. Okay. In this example, we're still at the beginning of the listening passage. The questions are on the right. For the lectures especially, there are often up to 5 question pages or screens. And you can see those are the tabs that I've labeled with a red box. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs. You can use those navigation tools, the arrows left and right, to move through the question tabs. Also notice that there is a countdown timer, and that's on the top right, which says time remaining 7 minutes. So there are 7 minutes left to answer these questions, and a blue next button. So when you are finished, if you want, you can click next to move on to the next section. You don't have to do that though. When the time runs out, the test will move on to the next section automatically. So you don't have to click next, but if you're finished, you can click next and move on early. So Mohammed is asking just how long the audio is. Just to remind you, Mohammed, the audio it varies in time, so I can't give you an exact number. But the shorter audio could be more in the 2 to 4 minute range, and the long audio could be more in the 6 to 10 minute range. So I hope that answers your question, but I can't give a specific number because the audio is, different a lot of the time. So it could vary, but it's going to be within that kind of range. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that answers your question for now. And I just want to show you something about how the tabs work. So when you click through the reading tabs, you can answer the questions for each page. And the great thing about the test is that when you're done answering the questions, that tab will turn green. So that's an easy way for you to see that you have answered all of the questions on that page. So you can see here on this page, I have 2 questions. I answered both the questions, and the tab turned green. Okay, so then I can move on to the next part. When I've done answering all of the questions, all of the tabs have turned green. Okay, so you can see that there. And that means I know I can move on. So just as a quick example, here it says that there are 3 minutes remaining. That means I could use that time to review my answers and double check that I am happy. Or I could click the blue next button and just move on to the next questions. Okay. All right. The first audio passage in part 3 will probably be the short listening. This listening will probably be about an aspect of university life. For example, you might usually hear about a professor who is reviewing a course syllabus, giving instructions for a presentation, or it might be a lab orientation, or it might be speaking informally on a similar topic, such as a student body. So basically, slightly more social or rule-based aspects of university life. These are the instructions for the short listening task. And I'd just like to ask everybody, what do you think are the important things to note about these instructions? So what are the important things that you should consider? If you recognize something, please write it down in the chat box and I can read it out to everybody. So you can click on the chat or questions box and write a message, and I can read it to everybody. Just what do you think is important about these instructions? Okay, so Daniel is saying the time. Thanks, Daniel. Definitely you have 30 seconds to review the questions and then 60 seconds to complete the answers. That's important. Daniel is also saying 3 questions. Yep, I think that's important for sure. And I'll just highlight these for everyone to see. Okay, so thank you, Daniel and Katarina. Sorry if I said your name wrong. Thank you for answering the questions there. There are 3 questions, and those are the times that you need to consider. All right. So one thing is to remember is that when your time is up, the audio passage will begin playing automatically. When the audio is finished, your review time will also start to count down automatically. Okay, so you will listen to the audio passage automatically. The review time will count down automatically at the end, and then you can move on to the next section. You cannot pause the audio or listen to it again. Okay, so please remember that. You can only listen to the audio once, since it is, a test, and so you cannot go back to that. Okay, I'd like to show you an example of what the short listening looks like during your preparation time. So this is the preparation time before the audio starts to play. The timer on your left tells you that this is your preparation time. So what do you think we should be doing during this time? So if we have a minute or so, or 30 seconds to look at this page, what do you think is a good thing to do? Please let me know in the chat box if you have any ideas. Okay, thank you. Skim question. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, it's definitely important to read and understand the questions as well as you can. Read the options as well. Yes, it's important to understand the instructions. So make sure you do understand the instructions. Now here, the instructions are pretty simple. It's just one line saying an audio clip will play automatically. So that's pretty simple. But sometimes there might be more instructions that you need to check. Baki is asking, do I think it's a good idea to skim the questions? Well, it's definitely a good idea to understand what the questions are asking, because then you can listen very carefully for the information that you need when the audio starts playing. So you have this time to get ready. You can quickly read the questions and check out any keywords and important information that you need. And then when the audio starts playing, you know what to listen for. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. People are saying things like identify the keywords, try to understand the questions as quickly as possible, identify the general meaning of the passage. Oh, okay. You would not be able to identify the general meaning of the passage because the audio has not started yet. So, well, unless you mean, of course, using those questions for information, it might be possible to get a general idea of what the passage is about. That's true. So thank you, Daniel. Yeah. You could do that as well. And skim the questions in 30 seconds. Yes, so you don't necessarily have to read all of the information. You can just pick out the key information. Okay, so if you think the time limit is too short, you could just look for the key nouns such as Dr. Mortimer, Curious Bunch, equipment, and those kind of words. And then you know that when the audio is playing, you need to listen for that information very specifically. Okay, so try to pick out the key details at least. All right, so this is what it looks like when the short listening starts to play. And that's when basically the countdown timer changes to the blue bar timer. Okay, and so instead of being seconds, number of seconds, it's just a blue bar. Okay, what does the blue bar tell us about the audio that we've heard? So where do you think we are at the moment when we're listening to this passage? Does anyone have any idea? Where are we in the audio passage? Okay, thank you guys. Yeah, people are saying in the beginning, which is correct. So it just moves along left to right. Okay, soon I'll play some audio for you and you can get a chance to hear what it might be like. And here the playback is finished. So at the end of the audio, this will be your review time. What do you think would be a good thing to do during your review time? So you have, at the moment, very short time left, 43 seconds. But what could you do during that time? Okay, thank you, Jose, saying check out my answers. Yes. So hopefully you would have answered all of the questions while the audio is playing. And then after the audio is done, you can check everything again to make sure that you're happy with it. Of course, if you missed a question, just because maybe it was too fast or you weren't sure, now you can make sure that you answered all of the questions and that you're happy with your answers. Okay? And of course, in the long listening, that part is a bit longer. Okay, so here it is for the long listening. The long listening looks a little bit different because, of course, it's going to be about a lecture, and it's much longer. So you also see that there are more question pages. In the short listening, the questions could even be on the same page. But here, they will be divided into probably 5 pages like this. Okay, because there will be at least 11 questions. You will also have more time to preview the questions and review your answers before you move on to the next section. So just to see if everyone remembers, how could you quickly check to see which questions that you have not answered yet? How would you know whether you have answered the questions or not answered them? Please write the answer if you know. Okay, thanks again, Jose. And I think some more people are answering now. The tab will not be green. Yes, thank you. There's a lot of people answering there, actually. Thank you, guys. So yeah, the tabs will turn green. So if you can see that the tab is still white, then you have not answered the questions or you missed one question. So it's good to make sure you can go back and check that. And we'll be listening to an example of this later on in the lecture. So for those of you who have been to these lessons before, you might remember that there are 3 skills that are tested within this test, and these are 3 general ways to understand the meaning of a passage. So number 1 is called general meaning, number 2 is called specific information, and number 3 is inference. And I just wonder if anyone remembers what these are and what these mean. And if this is your first time to be here, don't worry, I'll explain them a little bit. But yeah, I'm just curious if people remember these. So if you remember, feel free to write in the questions box and I'll read your answer. If you don't remember or this is your first lesson, then don't worry. I'll try to explain a little bit. But does anyone know? Okay, Jose, thank you for letting me know. I wonder if Daniel remembers. I know Daniel has been here before. I'll give you a chance to answer, Daniel, but if you don't remember or don't want to, that's okay. Oh, actually, Daniel is offline. Okay, so he can't answer. All right, then I'll just tell you then. So if you guys don't know, that's okay. General meaning is essentially, it means that the question focuses on broad ideas and not just a single sentence. So if a question is general meaning, that means that the answer to the question requires you to listen to a few different sentences to make sure that the answer is correct. It's not possible to answer these questions with just one phrase, just one sentence. But with specific information, these questions are focused on facts and key information. So somebody might say a key word or phrase, and you are able to answer this question just using that specific information. So the answer to these questions can be found in just one sentence. With inference, you have to draw a conclusion from the information that you got. So inference questions can be very tricky because the answer to the question is not in the passage itself. So for example, the lecturer will be talking about something, and an inference question will ask something like, what is probably the professor's feeling about blah, blah, blah? And so these ones are not just opinions, but require you to use evidence from the passage in order to guess what is likely the best answer. So it's not just opinion, but it isn't necessarily a pure fact because you need to derive that information logically from the situation. Okay? Whereas specific information, it's a pretty clear one. You can look for nouns. You can look for key information and find that answer within one sentence. All right, so those are the 3 skills that are generally tested. And these aren't just within listening, they are also within reading and writing too. So hopefully you can remember these and bear these in mind as we go through the lesson today. And I'll try to reference these later. Okay, in lesson 2, if you were here for lesson 2, we also learned about the 6 different question types that are used for reading. And listening has the same 6 question types. So if anyone was here last time, feel free to let me know what those are. If you don't remember, that's okay. Or if you're new, then perhaps you wouldn't know. And Kim is just asking, do I have to listen for a few sentences before I can answer for the general meaning? Yes, Kim, generally speaking, yes. If you are listening for the general meaning, the answer will not be in just one sentence. The answer will be in at least perhaps 2 or 3 sentences, perhaps even longer. You need to listen to that key information and then summarize the point. So often general meaning questions might come later. They won't be, for example, question number 1. They will be questions that are later on. Oh yeah, Daniel. Daniel is just saying sorry for his internet connection. We missed you, Daniel. Actually, I asked you a question and you were not here. So welcome back. It's nice to have you back. I'll show you guys the question types that we have. I think people don't know those. So these are the 6 question types that are used in the test. Oh, don't worry about it, Daniel. I'll explain later, perhaps. We better keep moving for now. Oh, and somebody remembers all the answers, actually. Thank you so much. Yeah. So these are the types. We have multiple choice, multiple answer, fill in the blank, drop down, ordering, and matching. And these are the same question types that are used for the skills in the test. I'll just quickly explain what these mean. So multiple choice just looks like this. It's a choice usually of 4 answers, and you click which answer you want, okay? Multiple choice, multiple answer is similar to that one, but you have to choose more than one answer. So in this example, you have to choose 2. Sometimes it might be 3 or maybe more. And another way you can tell is that the bubbles are a different shape. So here the answers have a circle next to them, and here the answers have a square. So with these questions, just read them carefully. Check to see if it says choose 2 or 3 or whatever, and just make sure that you know how many you need to click. Okay? Fill in the blank. These ones will ask you to choose a number or a keyword from the passage. So it could be a name, number, place, location, keyword, or key phrase. So it could be 1 word or it could be 2 or 3 words. And sometimes it might be just a number. In this example, the number is, a percentage. So you could write the number. So let's just say, for example, the answer is 21. You could just write 21. Or you could write 21 as a word. As long as your spelling is correct and you're still writing the number, you can just type it out. Or you can just write the number as a number. Okay? For drop down, you just click on the missing arrow, and you will be given a list of words that you have to choose from to finish the correct sentence. And once you click your answer, it will appear in the box. For ordering, you should read these ones carefully because you have to order things a certain way. In this example, it says put the oldest things at the top and the newest things at the bottom. So you have to move them around and put the oldest inventions at the top and the newest inventions at the bottom. Okay, so obviously with this one, you need to read it carefully just to make sure that you know what the order is asking you to do. For matching, you need to take these keywords and drag and drop them with your mouse into the boxes. And when you do that, it just looks like this. Okay, so you can just move those boxes around. All right, so those are the 6 question types. Pretty soon I'll be playing you a short listening passage so you can hear how that sounds. Before I play the audio, I'd just like to imagine that you're actually inside the official CAEL CE test, and you would have 30 seconds of preparation time before the audio file starts to play. So in your 30 seconds of preparation time, what should you be doing with your time? And I'd just like to ask you guys that question. So feel free to write in the questions box if you know the answer. What should you do during your time before the audio file actually starts playing the passage? What can you do in your 30 seconds? Does anyone have any idea? Okay, Jose is saying, read the questions. Yes, I think that's a very good place to start. And also, of course, the answer choices. So not just the question. So for example, number 2, you should also read the 4 answer options so that you have an idea of what key information you should be listening for. So like Kim is saying, actually, read the questions, answers, and specific words. Okay, thank you, Kim. Yes, and thank you, Daniel. Daniel is also saying identify the possible idea of the presentation. So yeah, if you understand what the passage is going to be about, that could be useful as well. And just basically listening for keywords and phrases. So thank you everybody who answered. Thank you, Saeed, as well, and Fabani. Sorry if I said your name wrong. And yes, thank you for your questions. Yes, Jose, that's right. You can observe the kind of questions as well. So if you recognize that this question is asking you for specific information, you can listen for those keywords. If you guess that it's a general meaning question, then you know that you need to listen to more than one sentence. Okay, so before we listen, I'd like to go through these questions and identify some keywords that could be useful. Okay, so I'm just going to read parts of question number 1 for you. It says, Dr. Mortimer believes that Mr. Sheen, the teaching assistant, will play an important role in helping students learn material covered in Unit what? What keywords do you think would be useful here in order to get the correct answer? What keywords could you listen for? Jose is saying a number. Yes, a number will likely be the answer. However, it could also be the name of the unit, though. It could also be a keyword. So yes, Daniel is saying unit. So definitely unit is a keyword to listen for. Kim is saying teaching assistant, but yeah, I think you can focus on the name of the teaching assistant, which is Mr. Sheen. Yes, thank you, Katerina, sorry. I'm not sure if it's Katerina or something different, but feel free to let me know in the questions box. Thank you. So yes, we can listen for Mr. Sheen and also the word unit. When we hear the word unit, we know that the next word is probably going to be the answer. Okay, so I've highlighted those for you there. And I think Jose said number as well. Okay, so thanks everyone who answered. What about number 2? Same thing. What keywords can we listen to for number 2? What would tell you the answer? Oh, thank you for letting me know, yeah. Thank you. Daniel is saying TCB, the Curious Bunch. Yes, I agree. And I think everyone is saying the same thing actually, yeah. Great, yeah, so you can listen for the Curious Bunch. Dr. Mortimer might be important as well, yeah, but the Curious Bunch is the most important thing. What about question number 3? What is the keyword or phrase here? There could be more than one. Okay, thank you, Jose. Yep, GCMS, the GCMS machine. And also, yeah, you can consider what kind of question it is. We'll talk about that a little bit too. But yes, the kind of questions that we're listening for. Thanks everybody for answering. So yes, the key phrases are kind of questions and the machine, the GCMS machine. Okay, so in question 3, you need to find out what the GCMS machine does. Does it help you to understand something about what, when, how, or why? As you go through each question, you might also check the answer choices and keep them in mind. So you have these answer choices in mind when you're listening. So what I'd like to do now is play you the audio file. Remember, this is about 2.5 minutes long. Okay, so 2.5 minutes long. And just like the test, I'm only going to play it once. Okay, so you can only hear it one time. In the actual test, you would be able to choose your answers when you're listening. But of course here, this is just a slide. So feel free to write down your answers on a piece of paper or on your phone if you want to bear those answers in mind. Okay, so are you guys ready? I'm going to play the audio file now if you're ready. If you have any questions, please let me know. Li Fong, I'll try to answer your question at the end because we have some resources that we're going to talk about at the end of today's lesson. So please let me answer that question a little bit later on. Thank you. Okay, Jose is saying that he's ready. So what I'll do is I'll play the audio file now. And yeah, just listen carefully and see if you can answer questions 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Introduction to Forensic Science, or FOSC 100. I'm Dr. Mortimer, and I'll be your instructor for the course. I also want to point out from the beginning that although the course material and the learning objectives may seem a bit daunting, help is available. We have a wonderful array of resources to help you understand and apply the scientific principles you'll be learning about, including a well-equipped section in the library. If you are really into checking out some pioneering methods and diagrams that are not yet available online, interlibrary loans are available on request, and they're usually accommodated within 5 business days. I'd say that the reading list at the end of the course syllabus is a good place to start. We have a world-class chemistry lab where you can learn anything from doing a simple TLC test to witnessing the scientific wonders performed by a GCMS machine. Now, you will need our teaching assistant, though, especially for booking a visit during Unit 2. That's Mr. Sheen, the assistant, over in the corner there. You're also encouraged to join the study group organized for this course. The group is organized and run by half a dozen 3rd and 4th year students in chemistry and physics, and they aptly call themselves the Curious Bunch. I believe that 1st year students can learn a great deal from their study groups, which are held every Thursday, I believe, and also from their case blog called The Sign of 44, where you can find an archive of the cases listed in the current and previous syllabi. Okay, any questions so far?
Professor, you mentioned a GCMS machine and a TLC method. I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about what they are.
Good question. Sorry, I should have clarified earlier. GCMS stands for Gas Chromatography Mass Spectrometry. It is a powerful tool. It not only separates a mixture of substances into individual components, but also analyzes and identifies what the components are. And TLC stands for Thin Layer Chromatography, which is a much simpler but faster way of identifying compounds.
Okay, everyone, that's the end. And like I said, I can only play it one time, just like the test. So when you're ready, please feel free to write your answers in the chat box, and I can see how everyone did. Thank you. Wow, we're getting a lot of answers, so that's great. Okay, so Daniel is guessing 2, D, and A. Okay, so Unit 2 and then D and A. Okay, so that would be study group and what? I think Kim is saying the same thing. Yep, okay, a lot of people are saying the same thing, actually. Okay. Yes, I think everyone's in agreement. Yes, so for answer number 1, the answer is Unit 2, that's correct. For number 2, the answer is a study group. And for number 3, the answer is what? So well done, everyone who got that. And thank you for your answers. I think everyone is pretty much the same. Awesome. Yes, just reading your comments. Okay, great. Yeah, so these are the correct answers. Just one more time.
Hello, everyone.
Oops.
Welcome.
Don't want him to play again. Yes, those are the correct answers there. And this is what it would look like when you have answered the questions on the test. So for number 1, you would have to write the number into the box or select it. And number 2 and 3 is just clicking the bubble, clicking the answer. So it's finished. Okay, and let's move on. So this is the long listening. We just did some short listening. Let's move on to the long listening, and you can see that it's long listening because there is more time. And also there are 5 tabs or question pages that you can cycle through by clicking the left and right arrows. Now, because this lecture is pretty long, we will not be listening to the whole lecture during this lesson, okay? Instead, we're just going to look at 2 questions and listen to a short part of the long listening answer, passage, I mean, just to keep things as a short, interesting example, okay? Because I don't want to play the entire thing. This lecture is about economic models and how they help us. And so let's start with question number 4. Question number 4 says, what is one way of grouping economic models that the professor mentions? And the answers are visual and mathematical, simple and complex, Cobb-Douglas and Heckscher-Ohlin, principal and sophisticated. All right, so can you see any keywords that would help you to find the answer as you're listening to the lecture? We'll go over some strategies soon, Kim, and talk more about what the general meaning of these questions can be. But for right now, I just want to focus on what keywords can we look for to find this answer. Does anyone have any idea? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so a lot of people are saying grouping the economic models, which is great. And I'll just highlight that on the screen for you. Hopefully you can see that now. Grouping economic models. So what I'd like to do is play a short excerpt from the lecture, and then you can listen carefully for the answer. And try to keep the words grouping economic models in mind. Okay, so they may help you to find the key information that you need. Okay, so if everyone's ready, I'm going to play that now. And I hope that this is loud enough. So I'm just going to play from my computer now. Okay.
I'm so glad to see you here for week 3, especially when the weather is so nice outside. In today's lecture, we will touch on the topic of economic models, which is a main
Okay, I'm just going to skip a little bit.
Is constrained and the production and aspirants. The model could also analyze the effects that the policy has on the national housing market and the economy in the near future. This model would include many more variables and incorporate much more complex relationships among these variables. Depending on the perspective you take, economic models can be grouped in various ways. For instance, just from the way that the models are presented, we can distinguish between visual models and mathematical models. Mathematical models include optimization problems where consumers try to maximize utility subject to their budget constraints. Visual models, such as the graph we just saw, present things graphically using flowcharts and diagrams. Another distinguishing feature that differentiates models is what kind of data they analyze. For example, some models use previously observed data to simulate economic phenomena and to answer what-if questions by manipulating certain variables.
Yeah, I'll just stop there. I don't want to play the entire thing, okay? Just that short part. And yeah, did you find the answer using that information? Some people are answering already. Thank you. Okay, so Kim, Saeed, Baki, and a few people now actually have got the answer correct, I think. So let me just say that the answer is visual and mathematical. Thank you everybody for answering. That's great. By the way, somebody is putting their hand up in the chat box. You don't need to do that. You can just write the answer in the chat box directly and click enter. Okay, so please just write down the information in the chat box. All right, thank you so much for answering, everyone. And that gives you a short idea of what some of the listening passage might be like. I'm now showing you the lecture notes that we just heard. Okay, so that's what the professor was just saying. In the actual test, you would not see this, of course, okay? This is just an example for today's lesson, Okay, just to be clear, if you're doing the actual test, you would not see something like this. Okay, so for our example today, I would just like to show you this transcript so that you can understand how to find the correct answer. Obviously, everyone already got the correct answer, so I think you have some good ideas here. Could you find the information that you needed in order to find the best answer? Where did you get that information from? Was it from the beginning or from the end or from the middle of the passage? Okay, so was it from the beginning, middle, or end? Okay, Baki is saying the middle and middle. Okay, Kim, thank you as well. I'll just show you the highlighted part. The information is actually in the second sentence, so it's kind of near the middle and kind of near the beginning as well. The second sentence has the information that we need. In this sentence, we hear about the visual models and the mathematical models, which of course was the answer A, or number 1. The first sentence talks about grouping economic models, which alerts us to the possibility that the answer might be coming. The information we need is actually in the second sentence. So now that we have found the answer, we can listen to see if you can identify which listening skill is the most useful here. So basically, guys, I'd just like to ask you, what skill did we use to find this answer? Did we use general meaning, specific information, or inference? If you remember those listening skills that we looked at earlier, which skill did we use? Thank you, Kim. I'll just wait to see if anyone else wants to answer as well, but Kim already knows the answer. So those are the 3 skills. I'll just say them one more time. General meaning, specific information, and inference. Which skill did we use to answer this question? Okay, so it looks like a lot of people know the answer, which is fantastic. Yes, we used specific information. So this question asks about something that the professor mentions, and we know that we're not looking for an inference question because the information is specifically mentioned, right? It's specifically said. So we know it's not inference. And also, since this question is asking something very specific, something that we can answer in just one sentence, we know it's not general meaning because we can get all the information that we need from the second sentence. Okay? So please remember that the specific information skill focuses on finding the answer in a phrase or just within one sentence. And these are just a reminder of the 3 skills, okay? So hopefully everyone can remember them now. General meaning is broad ideas, more than one sentence. Specific information is key information or facts, so that can be found in one phrase or one sentence. And inference is when you have to draw information from the passage that may not be obvious. So the answer will not be in the passage exactly. You have to kind of use a logical jump to understand what the question is asking you. All right, so I'll talk more about inference later as well, because that can be a difficult one. But for listening skills for specific information, here are some useful skills that might be able to help you in practicing for the test. Okay, so firstly, think about what kind of information you need to locate. So for example, in that question that we just did, right, we can look at question number 4, and we know that we're listening for economic models. So if we look at the answer key, we can check that we're looking for economic models, and then we know what information to listen for when we're listening to the audio passage. Okay, so that's what number 1 basically means. For number 2, how can you recognize the section of the listening that might have the answer? So one way to do that is to look at the question number. If the question is number 1 or number 2, you know, the question is probably relating to an earlier part of the passage. It's going to happen quite early in the passage. Okay, if the question is number 10, then it's probably near the end of the passage. Third, what information provides the answer? So listen for the phrase with the specific detail that you need. Number 4 says, find the answer choice that restates this information as best as you can. So basically, once you hear that key information, choose which answer key has the most in common with that phrase or keyword. Okay, so those are some general skills that might be useful. Feel free to ask me if you have any specific questions or anything as we go on. I'd like to move on to the long listening practice, but feel free to ask me any questions that you have as we go along. So let's look at question number 9 now for the same listening passage for some more practice. This question says, which of the following statements would Danny Roderick, the Harvard professor, probably agree with? I'll also read the answer choices for you. Number 1 says, some models are superior to others in predicting the future. Number 2 says, economic models always fall short in explaining an economy. Number 3, economic models should be as rigid as those used in biology. Number 4, some economic models are not solid in theoretical foundation. Okay, so are there keywords in this question that you should listen for as you hear the lecture? And I'd like to ask you if you know the answer. What keywords do you think, just looking at the question, what keywords could we listen to find the answer? Okay, so people are saying probably agree, which is useful for finding out the skill of the question. And also people are saying Danny Roderick. So definitely his name is very important, right? When you hear his name, you know that this information is closely related. So definitely his name is very important. Okay, so I have a question for everyone. Do you expect to hear the specific information that you need to help you choose the right answer? So do you think you will hear a specific information? Or is this a different kind of question? Okay, so Kim is saying no. Yep, thank you guys. Yeah, there are a few people saying no. Yes, we will not expect to hear the specific answer. Could anyone explain why? How did you know that? Or to put it another way, what kind of question is this? Is this a general meaning question or an inference question? Baki is just asking, what should we do if we don't hear his name? Well, Baki, I would recommend, of course, just listening for keywords that you can hear. So it could be economic models or another word that might relate to the answer key, like rigid. But of course, you should also listen to the passage as closely as you can. So hopefully you would have some information that you could use logically. Okay, so I'm getting a mix of opinions, actually. Some people are saying general information and some people are saying inference. So any more opinions on whether this is specific information, general information or inference? Okay, well, Jose is saying inference as well. So I'll just tell everyone now that this is an inference question. That's right. And the key word there is probably. Okay, it says probably agree with. Now, a good way you can recognize inference questions is if the word probably or likely or possibly is being used. And that's because inference questions don't have the exact information in the question, in the passage, I mean. So they don't directly tell you the answer. And that's why, you know, if they say possibly or probably, then you can guess that it's an inference question and that you need to make a logical connection. The answer is not going to be given to you directly. Okay, so try to listen to the keywords that you do know and choose the best answer. Okay, so basically, Daniel is saying you need to summarize it, and I think that's a good point, yes. You do need to kind of summarize the key information in order to find the answer when you're doing an inference question, and that's usually what happens, yeah. All right, so if everyone is ready, what I'd like to do is play you another part of the audio and try to listen for the answer to number 9. So you know that it's an inference question, and you know that the answer is not going to be directly told to you. So try your best to sort of answer this question. All right, so I'll play this now. And thank you, everyone. And if you know the answer, just write the answer in the question box. Oops. Okay. My computer did not like that. There we go. Okay, guys, sorry for that technical
In a
issue.
simplified manner. Models can only incorporate a limited number of variables or factors. Many factors, some of them critical, will unfortunately be omitted. For example, in the analysis of consumer behavior, cultural impact and spending habits may be omitted. One limitation of economic models is that their generalizability tends to be constrained by real-life variables or factors. This is referred to as the one-size-fits-all issue, where economic models fail to apply to certain settings and situations. In addition, one major assumption in economic modeling is that all other variables remain unchanged when attempting to establish causal relationships. Economic experiments are often critiqued due to concerns of their internal and external validity. Particularly, they may not be applicable to true economic behavior. This all other things unchanged assumption, or ceteris paribus, if we use a fancy Latin phrase here, does not hold true at all in real life. So it's not surprising that Danny Roderick, a Harvard professor of economics, said that models are never true, but there is truth in models, as they reflect a simplified view of the world.
Okay, guys, I'll stop there. Do you have any idea what the answer is, please? Okay, so some people are answering already. Thank you, Jose, and thank you, Mohammed. And okay, we're getting a range, actually. I think most people are answering the same. I'll tell you now that the correct answer is... Oh, Kim, you're changing your mind, huh? Well, Kim, you were right the first time. The correct answer is B, or number 2. Economic models always fall short in explaining an economy. Okay? So the correct answer is B, or number 2. So let's talk about, because some people were guessing other answers, let's talk about how we got the answer. And so hopefully it will make sense. Okay. So, sorry, I'm just doing something on my computer quickly. Make sure that's okay. Okay, good. Okay, so yes, I'd just like to ask you to look at the transcript. This is the transcript of what he was saying. Can you guess the best answer now, even if you were wrong before or not sure? Can you guess the answer now? Where is the answer here? What sentence is that in? Okay, thank you, Jose. Jose is saying the last part. So I'm just going to highlight that for you. And again, sorry guys, I do have a cold today, so my voice is a little bad, unfortunately. But thank you for listening. So yes, the answer is in the last part, and I've boxed the answer part so you can see it more easily. From this part, we can see that Roderick feels economic models may have their uses, but they ultimately fail in the real world. Therefore, we can draw the logical conclusion that Roderick agrees that economic models fall short. So now that you know the answer, what kind of listening skill did we use here? Hopefully you remember, because we actually talked about this earlier. Which of the 3 skills did we use? Okay, so which of those 3 skills did we use? General, specific, or inference? Okay, thank you, Mohammed. And yes, inference is correct. So hopefully this shows that even though this is an inference question, which means, of course, the answer is not directly there, you can still use specific information to get close to the correct answer. Because now that we know that Danny Roderick thinks they are a simplified view, we can look at those answer keys and eliminate the wrong answers, right? So for example, number 1 says models are superior to others in predicting the future. But the word simplified view suggests that Danny does not think it's superior, right? He does not think that it's better. So we can cross out number 1. We know that can't be right. And you can do this likewise for number 3 and 4. Just looking at the keywords that they use, you can look at those answer keys and see if the information matches what you hear. Of course, the answer is number 2, but we can also eliminate the wrong answers even if you're not sure. And hopefully then you can guess, oh, well, the answer must be number 2 because the answer cannot be number 1, and the answer cannot be number 3 because it says they are too rigid or superior, and those are different keywords. Okay, and that way you can choose which answers must be wrong. Okay, so it's very important to pay close attention to that information. And Kim is just asking about D. So D says some economic models are not solid in theoretical foundation. But the thing is, he does not mention anything about theoretical considerations here. He doesn't directly reference that answer. So basically, because that information is not said very clearly, Kim, you can eliminate this wrong answer because you don't possibly know. There is no information. Exactly right, Jose, yes. No biology too. So because of that, we don't have that information. He didn't mention biology or theoretical foundations. So we can sort of remove that information and remove number 3 and number 4 as answers because we know that they can't be right. Okay, so it's just another strategy you can use that basically if something looks wrong, if it doesn't seem to have the correct information, you can perhaps remove that as the correct answer. So so these are the skills that we recommend for inference. First, see if you can find a clue in the question that helps you to know what you need to use. That helps you to know that you need to use your inference skills. So basically, if it says probably, possibly, likely, one of those kind of words, you know that the answer is not exactly in the passage, and so you need to use your logical skills, which means that it's an inference question. Once you know that, think about what you learned about the topic, and think about specifically what things could relate to the question. And finally, you can think logically to draw a conclusion that will help you to choose the correct answer. Now, as I just said, you can also look at what specific information you heard and use that to remove the wrong answer keys. So if you see something that you know must be false, you can remove that. All right. Do you remember what is the third reading or listening skill that we haven't talked about yet? We talked about specific information. We talked about inference. What is the last one? Okay, thank you, Daniel and Kim. It is general meaning. So I'd like to look at general meaning now and just look at some general listening strategies that can be used for general meaning questions. So, previewing. Read the questions and try to identify the question types. So like we talked about, you can think about, is this a general meaning question? Is this a specific information question? Or is this an inference question? And that might be able to help you think about what key information you need to listen for. Try to look for keywords, of course. And we talked about that before. Look for just the key information in the question and the key information in the answers. For number 3, it says reviewing. And so make sure that you've looked at every question and make sure that you answer every question. Of course, you can tell that pretty easily by seeing if the tab turns green. When the tab is turned green, you know you can move on. Number 4 is note-taking. So not everybody finds note-taking useful, but if you find notes help you to think, then you can write down the key ideas and key details as you listen. The problem with using note-taking for listening, though, is that if you spend a long time writing stuff down, then you might stop listening to the passage and miss, key information. So note-taking is not as common as, for listening as it is for different skills. So only take notes if you're just going to summarize keywords quickly to yourself. If you're not good with that, or if you don't like that, you don't have to do that. Number 5 says deriving meaning from context. So if you hear something that you don't know, for example, if you hear a keyword that you don't know what it means, try to listen to the surrounding words and the context in order to guess logically what it must mean. I'm sure that if you're, still learning English and still getting used to living in Canada, I'm sure that you probably do this anyway. You have to listen to what people are saying. And when it's a new word or a new phrase, you need to listen to that surrounding context in order to understand what it must mean. Kim is just asking, I may forget what I listened to before. What can I do to improve it? Well, definitely listening to academic passages and lectures in general is a good way to practice. Of course, we'll recommend the bookstore CAEL CE products that you can use at the end of the test, at the end of this lesson. But even just using YouTube and general sources like that to find different lectures can still get you listening to things with a critical ear. So you can listen to things and sort of get used to just hearing lectures. So you can look up lectures on YouTube that interest you. That's one way to practice. And of course, you can take notes. You can note down key details in the test. Just remember, of course, that you don't want to spend too much time writing. So try to note down just the keyword and then quickly move on. Okay, Kim? But yeah, definitely practice does help a lot. And we'll talk more about that at the end as well. All right, so thank you guys, and please keep your questions coming. If you have a question or comment, just feel free. We're going to move on to the last task in part 3, which is the integrated speaking task. So there is also speaking in part 3 of the test. So remember that this is the last task in part 3, okay, the last part. Imagine that you have already finished at least one short audio passage and at least one long lecture, and you have already answered questions for those. Okay, so you have already finished short listening and long listening. This speaking task will then relate to the things that you heard from the long lecture. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we cannot listen to the complete lecture in this lesson because it's a little too long. So instead, we'll listen to a short excerpt, and then we can look at how you can prepare to deliver your response. Okay? So we'll listen to that passage and then give you a chance to think about how you would speak about it. And I'll give you some skills and strategies to practice with. And remember that you will only get a speaking question after you have completed the long listening. So you don't know what the speaking question is when you hear the lecture. Okay, so just imagining you're doing the test, you would hear the long listening and you don't know what the speaking question is going to be. You would get the speaking question afterwards. Jose, I think I will talk a little bit more about scoring in a little while, okay? But definitely these are the things that I'm going to talk about now. This is relating to how you get a score in your spoken response. So this is the speaking on the long listening checklist. Another thing to bear in mind is that we're going to email you later, and one of the email links should give you the speaking on the long listening checklist so you can look at this at home, okay? So you don't have to memorize all this or write it down, because that would be pretty much impossible. So we're going to email that for you later today, and you can have your own copy of this information. Okay, so let me just talk about these very quickly. Just to let you know, you will answer at least 11 questions after hearing the lecture that on the long listening part. Once that is all finished, you will see the speaking question. Your speaking tasks are scored by our CAEL CE raters, and this checklist just helps you to understand how that scoring is done. If you were here for lesson 1 or lesson 2, you might notice that the top part is identical to what we saw before, and the last 3 points are specific to the speaking task that you do in part 3. Okay, so just to generally summarize these a little bit, basically it's good to talk with a good volume and a good pace and try to speak with a natural rhythm. Kim, I'll explain that in a moment, Kim. Yeah, so I'm just sort of summarizing in general first. In general, the raters want you to speak with a good rhythm, good pronunciation, a good natural speaking speed. So try not to rush yourself too much and try not to speak too slowly. Just your natural speed. And use vocabulary that is specific and precise, because this is academic English. So it's good if that the rater can clearly understand exactly what you mean. So try to use words that are as specific as possible, and also organized and easy to follow. The other thing to bear in mind is that you do have a time limit, of course. So when you're speaking, make sure to fill the time. So if you're speaking for 60 seconds, for example, make sure your response fills up those 60 seconds. It's not good to leave 10 seconds where you didn't say anything. Okay, so it's important to try and fill that time. Daniel is just asking if accent affects your score. Daniel, I can tell you that accent's only really an issue if it means that somebody can't understand you. So if your speaking in general is just very unclear and very difficult to understand, then that might be an issue because it's related to the clarity of speech or pronunciation. But if somebody has a different accent and they're still speaking very well, that does not matter. Because you have to imagine, of course, that there's different accents for native speakers as well, right? So somebody could have a strong Scottish accent, or a strong Australian accent, or Canadian accent, or a British accent. So the actual accent is not a problem. It's not like a British person would score differently, for example, right? It's just that if the accent is actually making your words unclear and inappropriate, that might be an issue. Okay? And Kim is just saying, if I can't finish my speaking, does it affect my score? Well, Kim, it might affect your score a little bit if you're still saying something and you get cut off and you run out of time, because it's not very good time management. If you still said a lot of information, though, if you fully answered the question, then it might not hurt your score that much. So if you said a lot of things and then you didn't finish your final sentence, that might not be such a big problem. But if you're still talking and explaining something and you just run out of time or you leave some time, that's not as good as it could be. Okay, so I'm going to focus now on the final part. So the final part just means where it says speaking on the long listening, there's numbers 1, 2, 3. So I'd just like to summarize these for you quickly. Number 1 says, does the speaker use information from the listening passage to support and develop their ideas? So that means that you have to use information that was said in the audio passage in your answer. If you don't do that, if you don't mention the audio passage at all, then you could lose some points. Okay? So it's important to reference that information. Number 2 says, does the speaker use information from the listening passage that is relevant to the speaking question? Okay, so that means the question that you're answering, you need to use information that actually helps to support your point. If you use like different information, the wrong information that's not relevant to what you're saying, that could also affect your score a little bit, or potentially a lot if you don't answer the question. Number 3 says, is the speaker able to paraphrase information rather than repeating words or phrases from the listening passage? And this one is very important. I'd like to just stress this one. So that means that you have to paraphrase the information, which means change it into your own words. So rather than quoting the passage directly and just copying exactly what they said, you should change the wording a little bit and change it into your own words. Okay? And that's to show your command of the English language and to show that you know some synonyms and that you can use information in a logical way. If you just copy the information directly from the reading passage, the listening passage, I mean, if you just copy that information directly, then it's not really showing your own personal English skills. So that's why it's important not to copy directly. Okay, and I just like to emphasize that because it's a very important one. Because if you just copy directly, then you could lose some of your potential score. Okay, so I hope that makes sense so far. Feel free to ask me if you have any questions. And like I said, the email today will also include this speaking checklist, so you can check this at home and you can practice with it if you want. Okay, so here is your last practice question. Both the lecture and the question are taken from our free sample test, which you might be familiar with if you did the free sample test before. If you haven't done the free sample test, then I recommend that you go to the website sometime and try doing that. It's very useful. You'll see that this question relates to the long passage about economic models that we worked on. So we listened to some of the lecture about the economic models, and this is the same audio passage information. Okay, so I'd like to ask you first, what important points do you see on the screen right now? Please let me know, what do you think is important in the instructions and in the presentation of this screen and the question? What are the important points? Feel free to let me know in the chat box, and I'll try to read your answers. Okay, thank you. Time. Economic models. The preparation time, yes. The preparation time and speaking time is important because you have 60 seconds to get ready, and then you have to speak for 120 seconds. So you have to speak for 2 minutes. Actually, Jose, the blue bar is not on this screen. Oh, sorry, that's the recording time one, sorry, yes. I was thinking of the preparation time. Oh yeah, so the blue bar would actually come on when you're speaking. And when you're preparing, it will be the seconds counting down. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, I got you. Yes, Mohammed is saying the lecture notes are available for reference. That's a good point. You can click on the tab where it says lecture notes and look at the notes from the passage, and I'll show you that in a minute. Daniel is saying, remember to answer how. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, that's very important. I'll highlight these now and show you what I mean, because I think everyone's getting these, which is fantastic. So like people have mentioned, the preparation time and speaking time is obviously important. We have question and lecture note tabs. You can click on those and change between them, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. The other important thing is that the question is actually in 2 parts, which is what Daniel was saying. In part 1, the question says, what are economic models? In part 2, it says, how do they help us understand the economy? So it's very important to answer both of those things when you're speaking. If you only talk about number 1, for example, and you just talk about what the economic models are, actually you would lose points for task fulfillment. You would not have answered all of the question. So it's very important to say what they are and also how they can help you to understand the economy. In the instructions, it's also important to note that you should not copy the source information directly. So it says use the source information, but do not copy it directly. And that's very important. And lastly, you will be evaluated on the content of your response, the accuracy of your language, and your use of the source material. So basically, you need to speak for 2 minutes. You need to try to be as accurate as you can with your language, so using specific adverbs and adjectives. And also, you need to reference the source material, but don't just copy it word for word. Okay, so I'd also like to show you the lecture notes passage. If you click on the lecture notes tab, it will give you a summary of the lecture that you listened to. And it looks like this, just some notes, like bullet point notes that you can see going down the screen. Okay, so it's a kind of a summary of what you heard. I'm not sure if I understand your question, Kim. Could you perhaps rephrase that question? I'll try to answer, but I'm not sure if I know what it means exactly. Okay, so let's return to our instructions page. That was just the notes page, the lecture notes page. This is the instructions page again. Consider that you have 60 seconds to prepare, and you know that your response will be scored on the content, accuracy of language, and how you use the source material. What could you do with your preparation time to help you to get a good score on this response? Okay, so using your preparation time of 60 seconds, what could you be doing in this time to get ready to answer this question? Do you have any idea? And remember, of course, this is speaking now. We're going to do a speaking question. What could you do to get ready? So Kim is just asking, is it possible to predict the question? So Kim, when you're doing the long listening passage, basically you don't know what the speaking question is going to be. So basically I would say the answer is no. You can't really guess or predict what the next question is going to be. I mean, you might have some general idea because you know the topic. You know that the topic is going to be the same. So you know that, for example, the long listening was about economic models. So this question is going to be about economic models. But you can't really know exactly what the question is going to be, the exact words of the question. Okay, you just know what the subject is going to be. All right, so Daniel is saying make introduction. Hina is saying take notes. Oh, and Daniel is also saying take notes. Yeah, so if you're a note taker, you could definitely use this time to take some notes. And also you could make an introduction statement in order to start speaking right away. So if you write down your first sentence and you know generally what you're going to say, then when the time starts, you can just start speaking right away. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah. And also Hina. Okay, so these are some points that we can use to help. So using your prep time wisely. Number one, think about exactly what you will talk about. Might sound obvious, but it's important to have that general point in mind. Look at the lecture notes to help you remember the main points. So you can switch between the instructions and the lecture notes tab. Identify information from the lecture that responds to this question. So you basically need to look at those lecture notes and what you remember about the lecture and think about what information is actually useful. Write down any other points you remember in your notes that might be useful. Try to organize your notes. So just if you have some words, put them in order of what you want to say. Maybe you can do that by writing numbers like 1, 2, 3 and just order that information. And also make sure that you are rephrasing those key ideas. You're paraphrasing them. You don't want to copy the information exactly, remember. And try to think of a good opening statement, like Daniel said. A good opening statement can help you to start speaking right away. And it's probably more useful than a conclusion. So some people might write down a conclusion, and that's great. But in terms of just speaking right away, the introduction is probably more important. Okay, so let's have a look at some more points about using your prep time. I'd like to ask you these questions. What do you need to talk about? And how will you organize your notes? So I'd like you to answer those questions, please, based on the answer question that you have here, the example question. Okay, so the example question just says, what are economic models and how do they help us understand the economy? How would you answer, what do you need to talk about and how will you organize your notes? Do you have any suggestions? Please let me know in the chat box. I'd like to see what you guys think. Okay, so let's focus on question number 1 first. What do you need to talk about? There is, of course, actually more than one point. Okay, Kim is saying definition of economic models and examples. Thank you. And Saeed is saying intro about economic models. So yes, you need to talk about what economic models are. Okay, if you remember when we did the question, we did number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is what economic models are, and number 2 is how they help us understand the economy. What about question number 2 here? How will you organize your notes? Any ideas, anyone? Fabani is saying state the main topic and explain your understanding of it. Okay, yeah, you could definitely make an introduction statement, and I think that's very useful. And Daniel is saying list some evidence that might help us to understand the economy. Yeah, so you could perhaps list some reasons from the passage, right? And list some examples that you want to talk about. Yes, and Saeed is saying first. So I guess you can then order them, by number. Hina is saying definition followed by the explanation and then conclusion. If you mean writing those in your notes, though, Hina, it might be very difficult to write all that down. If you can, that's great, but just thinking about, you only have 60 seconds to prepare. So it might be hard to plan everything about your answer. Okay, and Daniel is saying, Daniel is saying simplified to complex and then general to specific. Okay, good. I'm going to give you an example now. This is just an example of how we could organize the notes. So because this is 2 questions essentially, what are economic models? How do they help us understand the economy? One way you could organize your notes is to put them in a table like this, where you have one part in one side and second part in the right side, okay? And I'll give you the passage notes, the lecture notes, like that. This is what you see in the test. Okay, so I want you to think about these main points and then think about the audio passage that we heard a little while ago. I'd like to see what notes we could make about this. And I'm going to play you a piece of the audio now. Oh, Baki, you have to leave? Well, have a great day and thank you for joining us. All the best. So if you do need to leave, of course, you can go. But if you can stick around for about 10 minutes more, I'd try to get through everything and a bit more information for you. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to play you a piece of audio now. And I'd like you to think about what information you could use in your response if you are making some notes, okay? So try to imagine how you could make notes in this table. All right, so I'm going to play that now. And sorry, I'm just doing this on my computer. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of stuff here. Okay, so I'm going to play it now. And starting now.
I'm so glad to see you here for. Let's understand and lecture by going over some of the limitations and uncertainties on today's topic. An economic model is a simplified representation or description of a real-world economy. They are created to better understand economic behaviors and to make forecasts of what might happen. Technically, economic models are the building blocks of the field as they theoretically represent how an economy works. Economists may even claim that economic modeling is the heart of economics. You may have heard of some well-known models before. For example, the Cobb-Douglas model of production and the Heckscher-Ohlman model of international trade. As you might expect, many economic models have earned their inventors both fame and money for their contributions to the field.
Okay, guys, how did that go? Do you have any ideas what notes you could make? Kim is just asking a question about long reading and listening. Kim, each part of the test has a different subject. So part 2 would have one topic, and then the topic in part 3 would be different. So if the long reading was in part 2, then that topic would be different from this one. Okay, so yeah, how would you make notes based on this information? What do you think the economic models are? Summarizing the definition? Okay, thank you, Daniel. Yep. I'm just showing you the lecture transcript on the left. Okay, that's what we just heard. So hopefully this will make it a bit easier for you. Okay, so Saeed is saying economic models means how the economics work. Thank you, yeah. Okay, so I'll show you the general pointers that we were thinking of. So this is looking at the information piece by piece, okay, in order. So let's start with what are economic models, okay? What are economic models? We can find some information in the first sentence. The first sentence says a simplified representation or description of a real-world economy. And so in the notes, I wrote down a basic portrayal of an actual economy. Okay, so that's just a way to summarize that information. So what other key information is there that tells us what are economic models? Okay, thank you, Matab. Representing the real world economy. That's great. Yes, so that is the next sentence that I highlighted. Theoretically represent how an economy works. So this is a way to show how the economy functions. You see, what I'm doing here, right, is in the notes, we are using different words from the passage. So we are not quoting the passage directly, we're changing them into our own words. Okay, thank you, Li Feng, as well. So what is the next piece of information for what are economic models? There is one more. I'm just giving everyone a chance to think about it. It's definitely not an easy question, but there is one more point that's being made. Okay, Matab is saying international trade. And Daniel is saying help the inventor get a good reputation. So yes, thank you, Daniel, as well, yeah. Because you see here at the bottom, it says many economic models have earned their inventors both fame and money for their contributions to the field. So that is related to the inventor's reputation. And we summarize this by saying a way for economists to be recognized for their work. Okay, great. I'm just seeing if we have enough time to listen to this audio now. I suppose we can play one more piece of audio quickly, if you don't mind staying for 5 minutes, just to wrap up this lesson. And so I'll play you the next part as well. And this is the part that focuses on how the economy can be used how they can be used to help us understand the economy. Okay, so this is the second part of the question. All right, so I'm just going to play this little short extract here.
Many more variables and incorporate much more complex relationships among these variables. Depending on the perspective you take, economic models can be grouped in various ways. For instance, just from the way that the models are presented, we can distinguish between visual models and mathematical models. Mathematical models include optimization problems where consumers try to maximize utility subject to their budget constraints. Visual models, such as the graph we just saw, present things graphically using flowcharts and diagrams. Another distinguishing feature that differentiates models is what kind of data they analyze. For example, some models use previously observed data to simulate economic phenomena and to...
We'll have to stop there because we don't have too much time left, and that's enough information. And I'll just show you the transcript of what he was saying as well. Okay, so that's what he was just saying. And so I'd like to focus on how do these points help us to understand the economy. So what would be the first general point that you might notice that we can use here? What information can we use? You can just tell me a little part of the sentence if you can. You don't have to write the whole thing. Okay, yeah, so Hina is saying the visual and mathematical models. And Fabani is saying the types of economy. All right, so let's move on to the first sentence. This is the first sentence that we highlighted. It's actually just after the visual models and the mathematical models, because that part, visual models and mathematical models, is actually talking about part one. What are economic models? This one is more about just how they can be used to help us understand the economy. So, goodbye, Mohammed. He has to leave now. Have a good day. Thank you for joining us. So we're almost finished, everyone. If we could just take about 4 more minutes, I think, to finish. I hope you can stay with me. Okay, so this says, how do they help us understand the economy? Mathematical models may feature everyday problems that have to be solved according to a group's income. So that's a way of paraphrasing that information so that we're not copying it directly. What is the next part of information that we need? The next sentence. Oh, and thanks for letting me know, Kim. Thank you. Okay, Jose is saying the kind of data or data. And yes, well, such as the graph we just saw, present things graphically using flowcharts and diagrams. Is that actually the part that you meant, Jose? But either way, we summarized it like this. Visuals demonstrate details of the problem. Okay, so that's just one way you could do that. These are just examples, just to be clear. Of course, you could summarize this information in a different way, and your own words could be different. Kim, these are the notes, the lecture notes. Hopefully this is the transcript. Hopefully you can see it okay. If you can't see, Kim, it might be a problem, a technical problem, but I'm just showing the notes right now. Okay, so Fabani is asking, do we have to explain the differences between each model? No, you don't have to do that necessarily, no. You can just focus on the economic models, what they are, and how they help us to understand the economy. Okay? So you can talk about how the mathematical models work and what they do. You don't have to spend time comparing them all. Okay, so the last point we highlighted is just there at the bottom, and it just means, just one of the ways we paraphrase this is to say, predict how things may turn out if we alter a few elements of a problem or situation. So those are just some examples. Don't worry if that was a lot of information. I also think we don't really have enough time to talk about this right now, so I'll just explain some things that make a good introduction statement for you. So basically, when you're writing an introduction statement, something you might consider is how you can introduce the topic, list your main points, and get the listener interested in what you're going to say. So try to make your first statement, your first sentence, as interesting as you can. This is just an example we have that I'd like to share with you. So this is obviously a high example of a test taker that we had. And it just says, some people find economics boring, but the fact is that the more we know about economics, the more likely we are to be financially successful. And then he says, one way to understand this topic is through economic models. I'm going to explain what they are, and then I'll demonstrate how we can use economic models to gain insights into how the economy works. So this is just a very good example, and you don't have to do it this way. It's just that this person is getting the listener's attention. They move on in the third sentence to introduce two subtopics that they will be talking about later. So in the third sentence, they explain what they're going to talk about in the future. Like I said before, don't worry too much about planning a closing statement. It's better to focus on your introduction and your main reasons so that you know what you're going to say throughout your answer. Oh, Daniel, this does not mean that you need to write it down. This is just an example of what somebody said. This is what they were saying. So you definitely do not write this down in your notes. That's for sure. Yeah, I agree. Okay, Janet, thank you for joining us. Have a good day. Okay, so one last thing I want to do before we leave is I'd just like to play for you an example test taker. Those of you who were here in lessons 1 and 2 will know this test taker is the same person. He is a band 80 response. And yes, Daniel, the band 80 response guy. And here is a transcript from him. I think it's easier if you can see the transcript as well so that you can understand what he's saying. It's the same question. What are economic models and how do they help us to understand the economy? This is the speaking checklist that you can bear in mind. And I'd just like to play this part for you quickly.
So what are economic models and how do they help us understand the economy? So economic models, simply put, are representations of the real world economy. So it's important to note that that means that they are simplified representations and that they are pretty much theoretical. So while they have a grain of truth in them, they cannot really account for like a perfect real life scenario. And the reason for this is because math and statistics play such a massive role in the economic model. And they cannot account for everything. So even the most sophisticated economic model will not be able to account for all the tiny nuances of a real life situation. And economic models help us understand the economy through visual and mathematical presentation. We are able to help us understand and maybe even predict the economy by having the economic model answer some what-if questions. For example, what if a certain resource or product is created? How would that affect the other products and resources, and vice versa? So by understanding
sorry guys, I just kind of cut off there.
The nuances of the relationship between resources and products, economic models can help businessmen or businesses to make really important decisions on how to direct their future investments.
Okay, so that's just an example of an 80-band response. Although, just to be clear, he got a speaking band overall score of 80. So it doesn't mean that each and every answer he did is an 80. Some could be higher or lower, but it means that on average, overall, that was his score. So some responses could be higher or lower. And in this one, I just want to highlight, you can see in red and blue, some of the key phrases, words, and transitions that he used to help get a good score. So red ones are kind of precise, specific words. They give a very clear meaning. And words that are in blue are transition words that they used. And so those transition words link each idea together. Okay, so that's just a way you can score more highly, because if you are using specific words and you're using transitions, it's very easy for the raters to understand your meaning. All right, so just some key skills you can use. Remember the key information from the long listening and refer back to the notes, the listening passage notes. Make sure you rephrase those key ideas and don't copy them. Use vocabulary that's specific to the topic. Try to include enough ideas in order to develop the topic. Generally, that will be 3 reasons for your answer. It could be more or it could be less, but generally speaking, having 3 reasons you can talk about is a good number. Speak for 2 minutes. So try to fill that time properly. Lastly, use your prep time to review the question and clarify what you need to talk about. Make sure to make some notes if you, review the lecture notes, Review the lecture notes in order to take the main points away. You don't have to make your own personal notes, but you can if that's helpful. Focus on other points that you remember from the lecture that relate to this question. So even if the lecturer said something that's not in the lecture notes, you can still use that information if you remember what they said before. And try to think of a good opening sentence. That's very important, or more important than the closing one, anyway. All right, so I'd just like to quickly tell you some things that we're going to give you, like some special bonus offers and things you can get on the website. So right now there are free practice tests. Usually they are $25 each, but you can get them for free with some special offers that we have. Also, we have a sample test that's free, and the CAEL CE Overview ebook, which is free right now. So I'd just like to just remind everyone that we're sending an email today. If you finish the survey, you can get the practice test 1 for free just by completing a short survey. If you go to the website on the bookstore, you can also try practice test 2 and 3 for free. You don't have to pay for them right now if you use the codes that's available on the website. The other good thing is that the ebook is free right now, and that's usually, that usually costs money, so you can get that for free. And you can also get 50% off a CAEL test if you are able to do a pre-test. A pre-test is a live test in practice. So please check the website to see if you're free for that and if you can go to one. Just a suggestion. Yeah, we will send an email for you later today. So please check your email inboxes today. Also, these are the CAEL CE website links, so please check those out and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And those, you can see there, the bookstore website is where you can buy all the study materials and stuff. Okay, so yeah. Yes, thank you, Daniel. If you're coming to the next week's lesson, I'll see you next Monday in lesson 4, which will focus on writing. If you're coming, I'll see you then. In the meantime, have a great week and good luck on your CAEL test. Thank you so much. You're welcome, Judy. You're welcome, Hina. And Daniel, you're welcome. And thank you, Jose. And thank you for answering so many questions. Thank you so much. You're welcome, Saeed. I hope that helped.